This is the Infinite Receiving Podcast, helping conscious leaders tap into a wealth of abundance across all areas of your life and business. I'm Susie Ashworth, and I'll be sharing with you how you can upgrade your reality through quantum transformation, because you are ready for infinite receiving. Hello, you gorgeous human being. It is Susie Ashworth here, and you are listening to the Infinite Receiving Podcast. I actually feel like maybe I'm going to get like a little band together, because I had Rebecca Campbell on like an hour ago and she did exactly the same thing. You were the first two people to sing with me. So I'm like,
well, it was like just so good. It required harmonization. You know, when the goddess speaks, we got to listen.
You may or may not recognize those dulcet tones. I am excited to be chatting with the incredible Emily Fletcher of Ziva meditation fame. Hello and welcome, Emily Fletcher.
Susie, I love you so much. I love your work so much. I love getting to know you as a human. I love your website. I love your podcast. I love your titles. Like, what a delight to get to be here and marinate in your brilliance. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I really receive all of that. And I think that actually where I would love to start is, how are you doing? How are you coming to podcast today?
Thank you for asking that. So right now, today, I feel effing amazing. Yeah. I slept for 8.5 hours. I went to bed at 10 p.m., which is no small miracle for me. Like, being a former Broadway baby, you know, I would get out of work at 11 and then I'd go out and I'd go to sleep at 2 and wake up at 10. And so I really trained myself for decades to be like a real showgirl. And now with a 5-year-old, that is not the program anymore. So, but the cool thing is that the ripple effect of going to sleep at 10 is that I woke up at 6 and I meditated and I worked out and I did sauna and I did red light therapy and I made myself a green drink, and like just the ripple effect of all of the healthy habits that happened because I went to bed early. Obviously I did my meditation. I don't know if I said that, but that's sort of that. I never miss that regardless. And so right now, despite all of the intensity on the planet, I personally, in my body, in my cells, in my energy, I feel really good. And I really think this is an interesting place to start, because I don't know that the world is going to get less dark in the near future. Like, I think that systems are going to start changing, and the ones that have been built on unsustainable concepts and philosophies are likely going to start to crumble faster and faster. And so I really think that those of us who are tuned into people like you, people like me, people who are really wanting to lean into the thin edge of the wedge, people who have decided that they want to lead with creation. It's like, well, now is when rubber hits the road, right? It's like, are you going to be a channel for light? Are you going to bring the frequency of heaven to earth? Or are you going to like let the intensity weigh you down and let you contract, which is so easy to do? And I get that it requires mastery, because it's like, we don't want to bypass, right? We don't want to not feel our feelings, but it really requires a simultaneity of like going into the darkness, expressing it, and then allowing the bandwidth to get even bigger for more light to come through us.
What is quite remarkable about you is there is a level of aliveness that emanates through every single expression that you grace the world with. Always. Like, and I am curious about whether this, I don't feel like this was something that you were born with. And then even as I say that, I'm like, actually, maybe we're all born with this. Maybe we're all born with that level of aliveness, and then it slowly gets chipped away. But I am curious about your experience with this. It feels like an ignition that just... Talk to me about where it comes from.
Yeah. Thank you. First of all, I receive that as such beautiful high praise. And I know that it can be a lot for people. Like, I talk fast. I have a lot of energy. I get really passionate about things. And some people are like, lady, you're a meditation teacher. Like, slow down, ease up. and I, no, there's no one way, like, there's no one teacher for everyone. Like, I get that I am not everyone's cup of tea. And it's not an act, like, it's not fake. Like, this is just who I am. As you notice, it's not just like just when I'm on stage, or this is just the frequency with which I vibrate. And I would say that I agree with you in that I really believe philosophically that 24-hour-a-day bliss is our birthright. I think that all of us are born with that birthright. And the only thing keeping us from that is stress. And so, according to the Vedas, it's like the idea is that we're just peeling away the stress, peeling away the conditioning, peeling away the trauma. And then we come back to our true nature, which is 24-hour-a-day bliss. But bliss is not necessarily blissful. Like, that's more equanimity, right? That's more knowing that things are exactly as they are meant. And now what's been interesting is that in the last 3 years, I've had the gift and the pleasure of so many initiations and getting opened up to this whole new body of work surrounding specifically sacred sexuality and using what I call creation energy as a manifesting tool. But the only reason that it works as a manifesting tool is because your sexual energy is in fact the generator of your body, right? That is the powerhouse of our energy bodies, of our actual bodies. And then, as you well know, of like the magnetism for receiving. And so what's been fascinating is that I now have 16 years of twice-a-day meditation where I've been chipping away, peeling away my trauma, my inherited trauma, the social conditioning. So every day for 44 minutes a day, I have been marinating my body in, dopamine and serotonin and bliss chemistry. Yeah. And then in the last 3 years, it feels like I've just been like nature just started fire hosing me with this PhD in sacred sexuality. And now it feels like, okay, there's a few analogies we could use, but it was like the soil had been tilled, right? Like the soil was soft, it was fertile ground. And then we put these seeds in, and it was like, like I was able to really take to these tools. And now it feels exciting to be able to use this generator, this life force, to be able to frame it as an embodied manifesting tool. But the answer is yes, to some degree, I've always had a lot of energy. Yeah. And I will say that 16 years ago, before I started meditating, I had insomnia. I was getting sick all the time. I was having dreams about being possessed by the devil. I was, like auditioning 3 times a day and getting rejected on Broadway. I was in unhealthy relationships. My father had just died. I had just started therapy. So like, yes, I have a lot of energy and like presence. That's just who I am. And life is life, and it will contract. It'll contract all of us if we're not actively expanding.
Yeah. What is going on when you say 16 years of tilling the soil? What is going on in your meditations to enable you to be releasing and excavating and letting go?
Great. Yeah, great question. So that word meditation is a little tricky now because it's become a bit like the word food, and then thankfully it is so ubiquitous. So many people are meditating, or at least are trying something that's calling itself meditation. So I'll get on my meditation soapbox for a minute, and I will just preface this by saying that I am in fact a meditation snob. Okay. Like I've dedicated my whole life to this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 13 years of teaching this. And all meditation is not created equally. Okay. It's just not. Like if you are using your phone and using an app and someone is guiding you through, like that is beautiful. There is power in guided visualizations. There's power in guided manifestations. I am a fan. And what I teach at Ziva is very unique. And I teach it because it is the most profound healing tool I've ever come across. And I used to pride myself on being a seeker, right? Where I was like, every book, every modality, all of it, like give it to me. And then when I found this style of meditation, I was like, oh, I'm not a seeker anymore. I found it. I found out that actually the only place that my happiness lives is inside of me. And the only time that it lives is right now. And it's because of this particular practice that I'm able to actually experience that viscerally twice a day. It's not just lip service of like, oh yes, the kingdom of heaven is within. It's beyond an intellectual construct. I'm actually viscerally living that every day, twice a day. And so the reason why this style of meditation is tilling the soil or chipping away that lifetime of accumulated stress is that it's giving your body rest that is 5 times deeper than sleep. And that's a really important point, because in order for the body to heal, it has to rest. And sleep is good enough to handle the stress from today. And sleep is the most expedient and efficient form of rest that most people have. But this particular style of meditation, so the Ziva technique is made up of mindfulness, meditation, and manifesting. And the meditation portion is based on something called Nishkam Karma Yoga, which means union attained by action hardly taken. So it's the lazy meditation, right? So you're basically just kind of doing nothing. It feels like a nap sitting up. Yeah. But in that process, you're flooding your brain and body with dopamine and serotonin. Your metabolic rate decreases, which is the rate with which the body consumes oxygen. So you're actually giving your body this supercharged rest, but without the sleep hangover. And when you give your body this rest, it actually starts to de-excite. And when you de-excite something, you create order. Like if you were to look at a snowflake through a microscope, you've de-excited the molecules in a water drop into the place where they make this fractal sacred geometry. Like you're creating order in the de-excited molecules of the drop of water. That's what turns it into a snowflake. Similarly, when our nervous systems are very excited, when we're stressed out, when we're in fight or flight, when we're rushing, we're exhausted, we have cortisol and adrenaline, that can make the actual cells in our body start to look fragmented, asymmetrical. Our body is more than 70% water. So when we de-excite, when we start to create order in our body, then the lifetime of accumulated stresses knows how to come up and out. The lifetime of accumulated stresses can start to find the exit because they don't want to be there. Nature did not intend for us to be sick, tired, and stressed all the time. Nature actually wants us to perform and to radiate and to be in flow and to have this extrasensory perception. But that is very hard because stress does in fact make us stupid, sick, and slow. And it does that because it's using unnecessary mental and physical energy to prepare for predatory attacks that aren't real. Like that's what fight or flight is. Like we hear that fight or flight a lot, like parasympathetic, sympathetic, we get it. But like imagine a tiger's coming out right now, like a tiger is in your, or someone comes in with a gun right now. Like what your body has to do to protect is not, it's helpful in that moment. If there's actually a demand, then we need those survival instincts. But if you are not currently in survival, then to have your body constantly in a survival mode is expensive. And so what we do with meditation is we take the body out of fight or flight. We get into what I call stay and play. And then we give the body rest that's 5 times deeper than sleep. And it's that deep rest that allows us to heal the stress, not just from today, but the lifetime of accumulated stresses from our past. And then the cool thing is that you're literally clearing the channel, right? Like then you're making spaciousness in your mind, in your cells, in your body, in your soul for infinite receiving, right? It's like you cannot be, there's no space inside of the vessel if it's clogged with fear and stress.
Yeah. Does this mean in your experience and experience of some of the 50,000 people that have been through your programs that sometimes meditation is not peaceful when somebody is releasing stress or trauma, that actually it can be very activating?
Yes. Thank you for naming that. Because this is something that I wish more people were talking about. I think that a lot of people, when they come to meditation, they're coming because they want to quiet their mind. They're like, I don't like what my brain is saying. And I've tried booze and I've tried pot and I've tried endless Netflix and it's not working. And I still have this bully in my brain and I just needed to shut the fuck up. And so we're like, fine, okay, I guess I'll meditate. And then we go to the meditation being like, all right, you're my last resort. Can you please stop my mind from thinking? And then we're like, okay, brain, shut up. I sure would like a snack. Oh no, now I'm thinking about snacks. Oh no, I suck at meditation. Now I'm thinking about how I suck at meditation. I quit. It's like, that's most people's like beginning and end of their career. Or it's just this constant, like I should, but I don't. And so if you don't have training or tools, then it really can be a bit of a battleground. But with Ziva, like that's my whole raison d'etre, right? Like I am here to give people the tools and the training so that they can do this stuff on their own. And yet what I am offering is a really powerful stress releasing tool. I am not offering a 15-minute respite. And interestingly, thoughts are not the enemy of meditation, effort is. So I'm saying this as a preface, right? That if you go into the meditation trying to quiet the mind or looking for 15 minutes of calm, then you might be very disappointed with what you get with Ziva. However, if you go to Ziva looking to get better at life, then you're likely going to be very delighted. If you're willing to bravely move through a bit of uncomfortability, if you're willing to bravely move through that catharsis and that release, then on the other side of that, not only, then you don't have to shut up the bully in your brain because the bully turns into your biggest cheerleader. When you change your neurochemistry, you don't have to shut up the brain anymore because it's actually cheering you on because it's like the actual like neuropeptide connections and chemicals that are forming the thoughts have changed. So you maybe don't want to quiet your mind anymore. But all that to say is that with Ziva, because it is such a powerful stress relieving tool, there is a period of catharsis that can happen. And that is the whole reason why it's a 15-day training. It's not just like, here, do this thing, goodbye, good luck. And it's why we have such a robust community, because I really think that most people need support on the other side. And no matter how many times I say it, like, hey, you might have some tears, you might have some nightmares, you might have some, like whatever's, it's like you squeeze an orange juice comes out. Yeah. If you squeeze a stressed out nervous system, some stress is going to come out. And no matter how many times I say that, people still want to know, is this normal? Is this normal? I'm feeling like this. Is this okay? And so that's why it's nice to just have a community and support to be like, yes, this is normal. Or in some cases, no, this is not. I think you need to dial it back. I want you to slow down. This feels like it's creating more suffering. Let's calibrate a little bit.
You mentioned earlier on, like, it's that visceral feeling that you have in your body, that bliss, 22, you said 44 minutes, so 2 sessions of 22 minutes.
Yeah. And I know it's a little confusing. For me personally, I'm doing 44 minutes a day, 22 and 22. What I teach in Ziva Online and what most of my students do is 15 and 15. Okay. Just because it's a little bit of a gentler practice, what I teach online than what I teach in person. So for most people, what you're looking at is like a 15-minute a day investment of time twice a day. Okay.
I know that you have done Layla's Sacred Sexuality program. I just recently went on her retreat, and I had
Can we just talk about that for a second? Like, how was it for you? And we just shout out to Layla. Like, what a master.
I mean, it was life-changing in so many ways. So many ways. But the thing that really stands out to me is that visceral experience of self-love, which actually I experienced whilst having a breast massage. And I never thought, like what you said earlier on about intellectually knowing, like bliss is available and this and this and this, and we know it in our heads, but to feel it in your body is a completely different experience. And I remember receiving this breast massage, and it went on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And then all of a sudden there was this moment where I felt the goddess come through the crown of my head and my whole body open up. And there, in that moment, I knew what it was to love myself, to experience self-love. And it's such a... the phrase is thrown around so much, but I'm curious, when you say you experience that bliss 15 minutes a day, I'm curious about what does that actually mean to you? What does it feel like? And then what other spaces have you accessed through the practice of sacred sexuality layered onto this fertile soil?
Yeah, great questions. So with the meditation piece, like what does bliss feel like viscerally every day, twice a day? What's interesting is that in the meditation practice, it's not necessarily that I'm even aware that I'm in the bliss field, right? So like what I teach is, so in the Nishkam Karma Yoga, what you're doing is that you're accessing a different state of consciousness, a verifiable fourth state of consciousness beyond waking, sleeping, or dreaming. And it's a unique like brain signature. And what's interesting is that you do transcend the realm of thinking and move into pure beingness. So you're transcending the left brain and going into the right brain. So it's not, when I'm in the bliss field, it's not even necessarily blissful, because I'm never going to have the thought of like, oh yes, I'm currently in the bliss field and it's currently amazing, because by definition, I have moved beyond the realm of thinking into the realm of being. So I can't say that like viscerally when I'm in it, it feels like my heart's exploding or my pussy's on fire. It just is. Like I'm not Emily Fletcher. I just am. And then what's interesting is that afterwards, I just have this sense of groundedness, openness, peace, spaciousness, restfulness, wakefulness on the other side, like as a byproduct of doing it. And really when I notice it are on the days that I skip. On the days that I don't do my second meditation, I like by 5 or 6 p.m., I start to get a little bleary eyed. My eyes hurt. I'm making mistakes. I'm reaching for chocolate. I'm starting to be like, when do I get to go to bed? Like those kind of, it's that cortisol and adrenaline dumping in my body. So when I notice it are on the days that I miss it, versus when I do it, it's like, I've given myself an hour and a half nap without the sleep hangover. And I have all this energy and this creativity and this spaciousness and this love. So that's the meditation piece. Now, adding in sacred sexuality into Ziva has been such a fascinating journey. Because again, like 3 years ago, I made a big life change. I mean, a lot of people's lives changed in 2020. I'm not alone in that. But it also felt like nature's like really was like, hey, here are the world's greatest teachers. Just go. And they just were like, I learned so much. And it felt like, hey, you know that thing you did for meditation of making it attractive and accessible to a mainstream audience? Like we want you to do that now with these more embodied tools, because as shit gets darker on the planet Earth, like we're going to need more and more light, and we're going to need to feel it in our bodies and heads, hearts, and hoo-has. So I would say that what's interesting, God, there's so much I could say here. But the day before I met Layla, I did a ceremony. I did a medicine ceremony, and it was like, forget about seeing the face of God. I remembered that I am the face of God. And again, that was very visceral, and it was very much the feeling of love, like swimming in oceans and oceans of love. And I think that that prepared me, because the next day I met Layla, who's now my best friend, and my lover, who's now my partner, Adam, and I met them on the same day. And this was 3 weeks after asking for a divorce. And so it was like a real timeline shift. Yeah. And now, and then 7 weeks later, Layla did basically like a sex magic ceremony for 7 of us. And it was the first time she had ever done it co-ed, so with multiple, with more genders. And the first time she'd ever done it for friends. Whereas previously it was just for students who were paying her in the jungle, and not to be stingy, but just because she thought that maybe her friends weren't ready or would judge it or would think it was weird. Like she was so used to really having to keep things behind closed doors. And so I think that there's been this, I'm in such deep gratitude for everything that she has taught me and everything that I've learned. And I would say that one way that I reciprocated that is just inviting her to blow open the doors on hey everyone, this is amazing. More genders, more people in public, we don't need to keep this stuff so hidden anymore. People are actually ready for more potent tools, because I think the whole planet faced this near-death experience. Right. And so I feel like when people really face their mortality, they get a choice of they just surrender and be like, all right, well, let's just have a slow decline to the grave. Or they really wake up and want to infuse as much life as possible in the precious time that we have left in the body. And so I feel like there's a track, people are choosing one of those two. We're seeing it, right? More suicide, more depression, more anxiety. And there's the other side. I'm calling it the K-shaped spiritual recovery, that just like the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, the same thing is happening in the spiritual realm. People who've not had access are plummeting into some really deep, dark, challenging spots. And people who have had the privilege of access to therapy and medicine work and sacred sexuality and meditation are popping off into God consciousness very, very quickly. And so this is an interesting point as spiritual teachers, right? Of like, what are we going to do to close this gap? And does the gap even want to be closed? You know what I mean? Like people have to opt in, like people have to choose. My best friend said to me, Emily, some people just don't want to heal. And I was like, what? Like I couldn't understand that as a concept.
Yeah.
But I'm starting to understand it. That like, it's just like consent.
It's scary. It takes courage to let go of everything that you have known, everything that you've experienced, every story that has defined your very way of being for a lifetime. It takes courage to take radical responsibility, to absolve others, and for you to stand in your power. Like, You've got to have balls to want to do that.
Yeah, or like really amazing lit up activated ovaries or somewhere in between. Yeah, you're right. It does take a lot of courage. And that I'd say is the piece of feedback I hear more than anything else is like, Emily, you're so brave. Emily, you're so brave. Emily, you're so brave. And I don't feel particularly brave. And yet I'm wondering if like, because meditation is practicing dying, like really you're transcending the identity and converging with totality every day, twice a day. And so I wonder that like practicing dying is just so part of who I am that I'm not so attached to what is. Like I'm really, truly willing to continue to step out of what I am in order to step into who I can become. But it doesn't feel brave to me anymore. But you're absolutely right. Like if you have a whole construct of life and reality one way, and it's been that way for 40 years, then the possibility of stepping into something new requires like almost retroactive accountability. And that can be tough.
And most people are afraid of dying. And it's crazy that I think it's probably equally true that most people are equally afraid of really living.
There's a quote I saw recently on, the College of Instagram, and it said, yeah, sure, you'd die for your kids, but would you get healthy for them? And I was like, oof, like, yeah, sure. People are like, I'm suffering for my kids. I'm doing this for my kids. And it's like, okay, are you willing to get happy for your children? Because guess what? They're going to inherit all this. They're going to inherit energetically your unprocessed shit. And so like, sure, keep suffering. Okay. Like, and I get that some people are like actually putting food on the table. And so I like want to celebrate that. And it's like, if you have any spaciousness, can we dedicate it to resolving the inherited trauma so that we don't pass it down to our children? But that's interesting. And also so I went on a trip this summer. Layla and I went on a trip. We called it the Priestess Pilgrimage. And the first place that we went was a place called Eleusis. And it's just 45 minutes outside of Athens. And it's known for these Eleusinian mysteries, this festival that would happen once a year. And they would say that people went to Eleusis to die before they died. That was the whole point of it, to die before you die. And they would say if you had not been to Eleusis and experienced the Eleusinian mysteries, that you hadn't really lived. And so that is fascinating that like truly, like if you do ayahuasca, or if you do bufo, or if you even do like deep sacred sexuality work or meditation, like you are practicing dying, like you're practicing transcending the identity and remembering the big truth is that we're all God pretending to be human. And that's like the basis of the Sacred Secret work that I'm doing. Like, so there's a whole new body of work I've been working over the past 3 years, and it's called Sacred Secret. And the secret, spoiler alert, is that we're all God pretending to be human. Like that's it. And I just want to give people tools to turn up the dial on their own divinity, their own power, their own creativity. But I'll share that for me, viscerally, in this cave in Eleusis this summer, we did a ceremony. So give me the plant medicine ceremony. And I very much was like, we were in the Plutonian cave. So it's like where, if you're familiar with the Demeter and Persephone mythology, it's where Persephone was Demeter's daughter, would like descend down into Hades. She would go into the underworld. And so this is ostensibly like the bridge between life and death, the unmanifest and the manifest, light and dark. And so I spent like 2 or 3 hours eyes closed. And when I opened my eyes, I had a really profound say. And I just said to Layla, I said, it's amazing with your eyes closed. And it's amazing with your eyes open. And while that was like a little bit of like high talk, like what I extrapolated from that afterwards was like, what if death is even more amazing than life. Like, what if it's actually more beautiful, more blissful, more connected, more all of it? And we don't know. But if we spend our entire lives afraid of dying, then you're right. I mean, the cliche of that we never really live is very true.
You said that you met your new lover and Layla on the same day, 3 weeks after you had asked for a divorce. Now, that is pretty wild.
Yeah, it's wild. Thank you for picking that up, because it's not a small life point.
Yeah, I'm curious, because I think that takes courage to dive head first, heart first, into a new relationship after only so recently saying, okay, I want to end this. And I don't know whether you went into your previous relationship thinking that it was going to be lifelong. I'm assuming that he is the father of your son. So there's a lot. That takes courage and maybe some craziness. What's the thought process that you are going through that enables you to really say, fuck it, I'm all in?
Man, what an amazing question. And I've recently, and look, this is not everyone's medicine, but for me, because I'm like a real rule follower and I love getting A+, and I'm very much like fixed mindset. Like, I love being the best. I love like marinating in my zone of genius. So actually to go into something new or to be bad at something or be something new, like that's quite scary for me. And conflict is very scary for me. And so actually asking for the divorce was the single hardest thing I had ever done, because my ex, and he's the father of my son, he was the CFO of my company. We were living together during 2020 lockdown in New York City in an apartment. Like, it was wild times. And this was not a fuck it decision. Like, we were 3 years into very deep work, lots of therapy, lots of counseling, lots of coaching. Like, we really left it all on the stage. Like, we did everything we could to, move this into the relationship that we wanted. And at the end of the day, it just felt like it was time to graduate. It was time to transition into a new chapter. And so I'll start there. Is that like we had spent many, many years of healing. And I think that work serves you no matter what. You know what I mean? It's not like that work goes away, right? Like, I think like whatever grade you get in that relationship, you bring that into your next relationship. But recently anytime I really get to the point where I'm like, fuck it. Like that, just like I'm willing to take the risk. I'm listening to that thing more and more now, because it's usually like, it's not when it's irreverent, not when it's disrespectful, not when it's mean to someone else or could hurt someone else. I mean, in this case it did, but the fuck itness is usually like where I access that bravery. But the question was, how did I lean into these new relationships? Was I ready? So actually that morning that I had met Layla and Adam, I was doing like a guided manifestation. I was like imagining meeting my person. Like, I was in fact calling it in. I know that's like, it goes against every piece of relationship advice you ever get. Yeah. But here's just like a little bit of backstory. I wanted /want to have another child. It felt like there was a soul who wants to come in. And so the day after I'd done this ceremony under the tree, I went back and I was meditating under this tree in this beautiful Qigong ground. And I was meditating and I was talking to my unborn daughter. And I was like, I love you. I trust you. I'm in no rush. You tell me when, you tell me who, you show me where. And then I walked up from the meditation and then people were talking about these meditation beds. And I laid down on this meditation bed and it was this vibroacoustic sound bed experience. Someone put their hands on my feet and I had a full Kundalini awakening. And I take the blindfold off and I was like, who are you? What is this? And Adam, my partner, was like, oh, I invented this. It's like this healing modality. I want to build a giant coherence machine for the planet. And I was like, oh, like, let's go. And that night we fell in love under the full moon. And that was 3 years ago. So it just felt like it doesn't make any sense intellectually. And it's not without struggles. Like, we're starting therapy this week and, it's still human and a relationship. And this one feels like this dharmic imperative. Like nature's like, hey, y'all need to make stuff together.
Because I think that those early stages of a new relationship can often be the most challenging because, again, it's heart work. And I'm curious how, because it sounds like you were just wide open. You were ready, you were open, and he was there. And I wonder, was there any challenge at that point, or did it just feel like, oh, this is supposed to be, and I'm not going to fight it. There is no resistance.
Well, what's interesting is that as far as the relationship is concerned, it felt like 100% like, yes, oh my gosh, like world changing, big cosmic love. Like we called each other cosmic lovers for a while because that's like how big it felt. And also I will speak that Adam is not your average bear. Like the capacity for this man to love the way that he loves me is unlike any, not forget about what I've been loved. I've never seen a human love another human the way that this man loves me. Like from day one, I've been like, please teach men how to love. Please teach men how to love. Because what he's doing is that he's actually worshiping the goddess. Like he is worshiping the divine feminine, and I get to be the lucky recipient of that. So it's simultaneously about me and also not about me, which is fascinating. And like his capacity is really big. So there was that. So relationship was like a full yes. However, we were long distance. So I was in New York. He was in Austin. I was living with my ex for 10 months. So like there was a lot of 3D barriers. So it's like we almost didn't have space for any internal barriers. You know what I mean? It was like and I think that we do that as humans. If there's no external barriers, then we put on our internal ones of like, oh, let me protect my heart. Oh, let me make up this boundary or this protective coating. Because if you live in the same town and you could like get married and have children literally tomorrow, then we got to kind of slow it down. We have to put on the brakes internally, but because we had so many external brakes just built into the circumstances, it was an interesting thing that we could just open our hearts all the way.
Can you tell me, what does it feel like to be worshipped? What does this mean?
Wow. Okay. Great question. There is like a real honoring, like a sense of devotion, a sense of, like he treats our lovemaking like as if we're in a temple. And it's not just like fashion, you know, it's not just like, oh, let's light a candle or let's play some spiritual music. It's like, it's in his cells that he is in like reverence, like deep reverence. And so it feels amazing. And there's a part of me that really, I mean, talk about infinite receiving. Like my capacity to receive is big, and it's been stretched. It's been like, do I deserve this? Can I receive this? Am I a goddess? Am I divine? Like, do I, there is that piece of the ego that kicks up. And then I'm like, yes, Emily, like you're building an entire movement based on reminding people that they are God pretending to be human. So like use this, like allow this as a visceral remembering that you are the goddess incarnate. And it's not because I'm special. We all are. We all are. And as I really embody that, like I both energetically and literally give other people permission to remember that as well. And it feels amazing.
The resistance piece, when there's that question and you say like it stretched you, how does that show up? How does that show up for you?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think in the sort of normal human relational stuff, like I'd say I'm more on the avoidant side of the attachment. Like I'm more of an avoidant attachment style. And so like as amazing as this is, and as true as everything I've said is, there's still a piece of me that's like 1 foot out the door. I'm like, well, maybe I'll just go, like, yeah, this is amazing, but I could leave at any point. Like, I think somehow that's how my humanness is able to handle it, where it's like, I might have to go. Or the other piece is like real shadowy, is that I judge him. Like I'm fixing in the name of love, which is really just like my own self-judgment. It's my own critiquing of myself that I'm projecting onto him. And that's really the stuff that we're navigating in our relationship.
Does that come across in like mother archetype? Like you should do it like this? Or is it different?
Yeah, there's some of that. And also like I have a 5-year-old. And sometimes I'm like single momming. So like I can get into like overdrive there where I'm like, okay, I'm running this company and I'm single momming. And so I have to like do everything and so I will sort of just get into those modes and not adapt or not get out of it, not recalibrate. And, he's a little bit younger than me. He's in startup time. Like it's a both and. Like there are some things that I have learned that I could I'm an advisor at his company. And so that's been a real learning. And this is something I would say is a pretty good rubric for everyone, regardless of what the relationship look like. That's like, how do you both like be each other's teacher and student in the way that every relationship requires, and not assume one role so much that you deflate polarity, right? Like if one person really comes in as like the expert or the teacher or the mother or the father, then like you lose that magnetism, you lose that polarity, which is the whole erotic dance, right? It's like, it's baked into our DNA. It's baked into like, it is that's not the animating force, but it is the sort of like big magnetic force on the planet is Eros. And that requires poles, that requires polarity. And if one person steps into mentor, teacher, parent, then we can really quickly kill that. And so I'm having to watch that for myself.
This is my biggest, I wouldn't describe it as fear, but awareness, because this is a big part of what really ended my previous relationship. And it was my
stepping into teacher role.
Yeah. Say that again.
Like you stepping into teacher role?
Yeah. I ended up, it wasn't just, it was mother role. It was, I ended up treating him like a child, and we could not get out of that dynamic. He then deferred because I knew the answer. I would take care of it. I would organize it. It's quicker if I just do it. And so I am wildly conscious now of being this boss, being a CEO, having a big vision, having a big dream, and knowing how to still be the goddess and knowing how to stay and allow myself to be in my feminine. And ultimately, this is the whole journey of infinite receiving. Like, can you allow yourself to open your heart, open your arms, and just say, fuck yes,
Yes. Yeah.
And I find
God bless. I mean, I want to just celebrate you and support you on this and say that I'm in that with you, sister. Like I am in it with you. And some tools that have helped. There's a book called Queen's Code by Alison Armstrong. Have you read that or heard of that?
I've read that.
Okay, great. That's a good one, right? Of just like taking the vow to not castrate anymore. And also Regina Thomashower, my roommate, Mama Gina, she really believes that like, and I don't know that I fully agree, but I'll share her philosophy. She's like, they can't king themselves. We have to king them. Like we have to coronate them. And so it's like, could you take the energy that you were using to mother and instead use that energy to king? And so my practice right now is like, can I worship the divine masculine through him? Can I really see the God in him? And he's giving me a masterclass in it, but not by teaching me, by living it. And so like, can I do that for and with him and honor him in that way? And it feels like there is still like, I'm taking on the role of coronation, but if it's like, if the mothering thing comes easily, could it be like you mothering your 16-year-old instead of your 6-year-old? You know what I mean? Of like, hey, I need you to go to the grocery store. I need you to do that. I trust you. I trust you. And it's like, you're empowering, right? It's like, you've got this. And then letting them figure it out and do it on their own versus like, fine, I'll just do it. I'll just pack your lunch and I'll put on your jacket and I'll take you to preschool and then I'll wash your clothes. And it's a different phase of motherhood. You know what I mean?
How because when you speak, and it's interesting, it's probably the first time throughout this whole conversation where I hear when you speak it, like it's you're in that training of worshipping the divine masculine through him. There's like, it's slightly less expanded. It's just
because I'm not doing it.
Okay.
I'm not doing it. I know intellectually I'm supposed to be doing it, and I'm not there yet.
What are you finding
so
difficult?
I'm lying. I mean, are you going to charge me for therapy after this? So good. What am I finding difficult about it? I'm finding difficult about it because in the past I have sort of like people pleaser, codependent, adult child of an alcoholic tendencies. And conflict is historically challenging for me. And so historically I will overcompensate in my relationships, right? I'll be like, it's fine. And I'll just do it, or I'll make up for it, and so I'm really wanting to not do that this time and like set boundaries and state what I want and believe that I deserve what I desire. Mm-hmm. And so there are things where that is not being met. And so my intellectual 3Ds human self is like, well, once these boxes are checked, like once these needs are met, then I can worship the divine masculine. That's my theory that's not working.
And so you already said that you're starting therapy. I suppose I'm curious about, and maybe that's just it. Maybe in our world, when things don't work as well as we want them to work, we get a coach, we buy a program, we get therapy, we work our way through it. Is there anything else outside of that you are doing in order to, create a different reality here?
Yeah, there's a few things. Like one, it feels like this is really an opportunity for me to learn to trust the masculine. You know, my dad was amazing and brilliant and an alcoholic and manic depressive and bipolar and violent. And so there is like a real like deep cellular pre-verbal distrust of the masculine that will likely show up in any relationship that I am in. And so it's like acknowledging that, owning that as my own, recognizing when I'm putting that on my partner. And so like, that's my work to do. And yes, it can show up in our relationship and our couples therapy, but that at the end of the day, I got to do that myself. Like either I'm going to trust the masculine or not. And it's just like, am I choosing to stay in this prison? I won't say of my own making, but it's like, if you're an adult and you have the privilege of seeing what your stuff is and the privilege of being able to get help, which I recognize are both privileges. It's like, are you going to utilize those or not? So that's one part of it. How I learned to trust the masculine, I think is a multifaceted. I've really been enjoying parts work or IFS. And then also I'd say that the sacred sexuality piece, like just really like getting into my own pleasure, like using my pleasure as a way to love my body and love myself, and even applying that to different phases of my life. Like that's been really healing. And I also think just the hard facts of this distrust will show up regardless of the person that I am with. Like that feels like a big key point. And that actually the stuff that I'm mad about in our relationship, that let's say if we really believe that we're all manifesting our reality all the time, that I even made these so that I could be mad at him, so that I could express my unexpressed anger at my dad, so that I could do it with my partner. I manifested that too. So it's just like outrageous radical responsibility. So there's that, my work. And then our work, we're doing some couples parts work. And then the other thing that Adam keeps saying, and so beautifully, he's like, can we please just be on the same side of the table? Can we be on the same side of the table? Can we be on the same side of the table? And which is a simple concept, but so profound actually. And interesting, we like walked right up to the edge. We almost broke up at Burning Man. We did this wild ceremony like speaking of the Eleusinian mysteries, like I got to meet the book, the author of the Immortality Key. I got invited to do a big ceremony at this camp where they had made this Eleusinian chalice. It's a whole nother story for another day, but like big, beautiful, world changing, serendipity. And we did this ceremony, and it was like not like just cute Burning Man ceremonial fashion. Like it was a legit ceremony, and it opened up some stuff. Like every single person who was there, like the whole rest of their burn just got wild. So anyway, that night, Adam and I almost broke up, where we were just like, I don't see how we move forward. Like you want this, I want this. I don't know how we reconcile. And then probably most people heard like the rain and the mud, and people got trapped and no one could leave. And so after we almost broke up, I was like, why don't we sleep on it? He actually was like, why don't we sleep on it? We slept for 24 hours. We slept through all of the rain. We woke up and now we're trapped. And our friends who were right next to us, they were together for 5 years, and then they broke up. And then they got back together and they got engaged at Burning Man. So here nature has like trapped us with this couple who's broken up and then gotten engaged. And so we had like 5 hours in their RV, and we just interviewed them. We were like, why did you break up? What were your issues? What counseling did you do? What did you learn? And it was like a mirror of our issues, like the exact issues. And they kept saying, well, the thing we did was we got on the same side of the table. We got on the same side of the table. It was us against the problem, us against the problem. And that is what Adam had been asking for. So it was like very clearly goddess being like, y'all are not done. You need to get on the same side of the table. So that's where we are.
Wow. Do you feel excited?
Yeah,
about
I do.
The future with him? Yeah.
I do. I love life with him. It's so beautiful, and it's so fun, and it's so loving. And our mutual friend, Sarah Jenks, she does this thing called, shamanic astrology, where she looks at the birth charts of both people in the couple. And she believes, and I guess this is very heteronormative, but like for men are here to get a PhD in their Mars sign, and women are here to get a PhD in their Venus sign. So like, that's like your big course curriculum. So what I'm here to get a PhD in is Aquarius, which is like love and alien energy, like weird love, like loving so big it's weird. And that's his, that's what he already has a PhD in. He's here to get a PhD in Leo. He's here to learn how to be a star. And I'm like, my middle name is Stella, which is Italian for star. I've been performing since I was 8. You know what I mean? I got that. And so so I love that idea that we have the PhDs in the thing that the other person needs to get the PhD in. And so that feels really fun and exciting.
I also think just listening to your story and knowing you have a PhD in loving life. And when I hear also you describe briefly your father's story and his experience and being bipolar and manic depressive and all that, that doesn't escape me how you are the complete opposite of that. It's like that was the shadow, and then there you are. You've created an existence where you couldn't be further from that shadow. And so that is I think that is beautiful and interesting.
Thanks.
And you also already have the codes, and the way that you spoke about Adam when he came, and I don't know whether he was the person who touched your feet, but he was the person who was there when you opened your eyes. That's also star quality. And so it's like, yes, you have each other's codes, but you also have, we all have all of the codes, right? We all have all of the curriculum because we are all things. That's why you're here.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful reminder of he has all his codes. I have all my codes. That's an interesting frame of what are we waking up inside of ourselves versus giving each other codes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so proud of the work that I've done and the way that I love life and genuinely the joy that I get to experience every day is both who I am and also earned. But I will say there is a shadow side to that too, in that because I was so afraid of conflict, so for me, conflict equaled death. When I was a kid, Like, I really somehow got the memo that like, that it was already so violent and scary, but if we left, that my mom would say like, I don't know what your dad is capable of. I don't know what your dad is capable of. And so I assumed that if we left, that we would die, like he would kill us. And so for me, conflict so equaled death that like truly I've spent like 44 years, like not going to have that conversation. Nope. Just going to avoid it. Like really need other people to be happy in order for me to feel safe and happy. And so there's also a world where I've like I can see this through the codependent lens of I built all of Ziva and like, I really want the whole world meditating and now practicing pleasure prayer because I need everyone else to be happy in order for me to be happy.
Which is an impossible. It's an impossible quest.
Impossible goal.
Yeah.
It's an impossible quest, and that is obviously not 100% of it, but it's a bit of a dramatized. It's a dramatized thought experiment.
But it does take us back to what you said at the beginning, when you know, at the point of recording, there is so much pain and suffering going on in the world with Israel, with the Palestinians, and it's like the world is hurting, and there's unfortunately there is always war, but at this point in time, this is the biggest conversation that is happening across at least our world. And you referenced at the beginning, like you don't feel like things are going to get lighter or brighter sooner. Yeah. And so whilst it does sound like an impossible quest, maybe it's the most important quest right now on the planet.
Yeah, it's like for the people who are willing, for the people who have opted in, for anyone listening to this Infinite Receiving podcast, anyone in Susie Ashworth's world, right? Like you have gotten the memo, you have raised your hand, like you have chosen to be a light worker on this planet. Mm-hmm. And I think that in the times of increasing darkness, like we really, like I said, like this is where the rubber hits the road. It's nice to just, have our altars and have our vision boards and do our personal practices when it's all sunshine and roses. But it's like, this is what we've been preparing for. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, okay, like, can you bring light into a room filled with pain? And where this requires an extraordinary amount of mastery is that it's not about bypassing your own pain and really about not bypassing other people's pain. So it's like, how do we simultaneously allow people to feel safe enough to express the bigness of the grief, the bigness of the rage, the bigness of the fear? But then we don't stay there, right? Because what I've found is that the feelings just want to be felt. They want to be expressed. They want to be heard. They want to be seen, like all of us. And then once we do that, once we feel them, then they'll take a seat in the back. But if we don't, then they try and grab the wheel. And so it's part of why, like inside of the Sacred Secret work that I'm birthing, there is a tool called emotional alchemy. And the whole point is like, can we get in there and feel and sound and move the darkness, right? And then the idea is that we start to alchemize it when it's ready, right? We start to alchemize it with our joy, with our bliss, even with our pleasure. And so that I think is going to be an increasingly powerful tool for us to have for us individually. And then something we can offer to people. Because it's like, if we can't hold space for ourselves, how are we going to hold space for someone else? And I would say that as light workers right now, which to me is just like, we're just bringing the frequency of heaven to earth. Like, forget about later, right? It's like, now can we, like, how much can we channel light now? And in so doing, help people to feel safe enough to feel what's real. And then like, as they alchemize, as they clear that channel, then start to fill it with bliss, fill it with pleasure.
Why do you think that, I wouldn't say that pleasure is taboo, but when I think about my own experience with pleasure, it has, like, again, in that same vein of, can I allow myself? Like, I've stopped myself because it's felt too much. And
too good.
That's too good. Like, this is too good. This is too much. This doesn't feel safe for me to allow that much pleasure to ripple through my body. Let's shut it down. Why does that happen?
Can you give me a quick example of a time that you would shut it down? Would it be like in physical sexual pleasure, or like this cake is too delicious, or I don't?
Okay, well, I am going to share something now.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
It feels like we're going there. Okay, so...
Here we go.
Oh, no, I don't know if I can. Okay, I'm going to share this. So I once, this is quite a few years ago, I was on the pleasure path, and I knew that I wanted to experience more. I felt very shut down physically, sexually for a long time. And so I went for a series of yoni massages. And actually it was like starts with light touch. It's a whole kind of 7 series thing. And the first time that I went, I had this light touch massage, and I had a full body orgasm. It was absolutely incredible. And the guy was like, "You're so sensitive. This is amazing. The next time you come back, we're going to use like this bullet." And I asked the question, has anybody ever said, stop, like it's too much? It was so weird, such a weird question to ask, because that had never been my experience ever. But I asked that question, and he said, no, it's never happened. So guess what happened? Hi, please.
Love being the first. Love being an innovator.
Yeah. So that would be an example, and and I feel like whilst maybe it wasn't always as blatant as that, I think that allowing and receiving, it has been a real journey. And that's why this sacred sexuality journey for me has been so life-changing, because I've opened myself up to a whole new level of allowing and receiving that I didn't even know was possible. But speaking to many of my girlfriends, I know that that's not an unusual story. Like, people are like, wow, can I really have energetic orgasms? Can I really have, feel the light of God in my chest just through a breast massage? Like, wow, is that even possible? And I wonder, why do we have such a contracted relationship with receiving and pleasure specifically?
Okay. All right. Here we go. Put me in, coach. Put me in. Oh, there's so many things I could say, but I'm going to start with a quick story. I think people learn through stories, but I facilitated a Sacred Secret retreat a few weeks ago, and there was a woman there who, very intense, long story, but had basically been in deep in the church, but like I would call it like religious abuse. Like the particular world that she was living in had a very abusive mother, very controlling mother that she lived with up until her 30s. So she was about 2 years out of this particular sect. And she showed up at the retreat, did not tell us this beforehand, but then we did a ceremony, and we did a pleasure prayer ceremony, which is basically like my version of sex magic. It's like I've spent the past few years sort of like creating new nomenclature and creating new terms to help to bring these practices to the mainstream. And I think that sex and magic are both triggering for a mainstream audience. And so I'm basically just like, how can we create words that speak to what they are without creating contraction unnecessarily? So we were doing something called pleasure prayer, right? Which is we were using your pleasure to pray. And at the end of the ceremony, actually it was the next day, I was doing, recap, integration. And this woman raises her hand and she said, "So I have something really vulnerable to share." I'm like, okay. She said, "I'm actually a virgin. I'm 33 and I'm a virgin. And last night I had my first orgasm of my entire life." And we were all celebrating her. And then cut to last week, I was on a Zoom and she shares again. She's like, "Yesterday I had a full body energy orgasm." And I was like, "Girl, this is amazing." Like what is possible once you open that seal? Like again, our bodies, just like 24-hour day bliss is our birthright. I think that pleasure is also our birthright. Like, nature installed these organs in us. Nature installed these neurochemicals. Nature has given us these gifts. And so the fact that we have all, I won't say allowed ourselves, but it's been a very effective, very strategic campaign for tens of thousands of years to divorce us of our own divinity. And pleasure is a part of that divinity. And what I believe is that people who really know that they are God, people who really viscerally understand how powerful, how creative they are and how much pleasure is available to them, are very hard to control. And so this actually has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with politics, because religion in and of itself, if you really look at the core of all of the teachings, it's love, unity, acceptance, kindness, right? Like that's what the That's what the religious teachings are teaching. It's the human organizations that then start to surround that when they start to get into power, land grabs, power control. And this was a big part of why Layla and I went to Greece this summer, is that it felt important to go back to the place which was the birthplace of Western civilization as we know it, right? Like the big philosophers and leaders and generals like Plato and Euripides and Aristotle, like they were the ones going to experience the Eleusinian mysteries, where these priestesses were serving medicine and doing fertility rituals. So they were basically doing sex and drugs, right? The thing that we've been told is bad, that we do not deserve, the very thing that we've been thought is a sin and shameful and wrong, that we've closed ourselves off from. So the reason why Layla and I went back was not like, oh, look, people were using plant medicine and sacred sexuality rituals. That's not news. Almost every indigenous society on every continent has been doing this since the beginning of time. Why this felt specifically impactful is, one, it's our particular lineage, but two, this was the civilization that then became colonial and then took it away from everyone else. And then when the church took a lot of these practices and meaning specifically the Eucharist, so like drinking the body and blood of Christ, that was adopted and adapted from these priestesses serving plant medicine. So it's like one thing to have someone talking about God. It's quite another to experience yourself as God viscerally through communing with plants. It's like talking about sex versus having sex. Two very different things. Yeah. And so I think that why do we all shrink from it? It's because we've been taught that it is a sin. We've been taught that it's shameful. We've been taught that our bodies are less than. I mean, the word pussy, right? Like, so Regina, again, my roommate, wrote a New York Times best-selling book called Pussy, A Reclamation. Because here's this matrix point, this birthplace for the entirety of civilization, 10,000 nerve endings for the express purpose of pleasure. And yet we've taken that word and we've made it the most derogatory insult in the English language. Like, what does that say? Like, what are we? And if that is the anatomy that you have, what does that do to your sense of self? So there's so many different ways that we can reclaim here. But I think that the short answer is that, like, every time you engage in pleasure, every time you create more infinite receiving, every time you open up your vessel for what you believe you deserve, it can be like a radical act, and it can be a liberation and a reclamation, so that you remember that your desires and your pleasure are actually divinely inspired.
Well, that is probably the most exquisite way to almost end this conversation. Thank you. I have 6 questions I love to ask all of my guests when they come on. So, quick fire round. Emily, what does infinite receiving mean to you?
I'd say remembering that we are God pretending to be human. If I remember that I'm divine, then it doesn't feel like a challenge. It's just, I am already infinite, so I can give infinitely and I can receive infinitely. It's like allowing.
How good are you at it as a verb?
Like on a scale of 1 to 10?
Yeah. You can scale it if you want it.
I mean, I give myself like an 8. And I only say, I might say like on the scale of humans, I give myself a 9.5. Like I'm pretty great at it compared to most humans. But if I'm scaling it on what I know is possible, I think I have a lot of headroom. I mean, infinite as it were.
Where or who in your life can you allow to love you more right now?
For sure, Adam. For sure, my partner. Talk about an infinite capacity. Say my mom and my sister. I love them and they love me so much. And I think just making more time, more space so that we can love each other more.
What is your greatest attribute?
What feels relevant right now in this moment is this veracity for life, this sense of aliveness. My usual intellectual answer is my ability to take esoteric concepts and communicate them in a way that is both attractive and accessible to a mainstream audience.
What are you consciously manifesting right now?
I am consciously manifesting the most aligned, delightful, high impact people joining me. We're doing our first Sacred Secret at-home retreat so that people can learn these tools from the comfort and safety of home. And this is like the beginning of this movement. It's like the beginning of this whole new body of work. And so it feels important of who's there, that like, yes, of course we all, you know, when we're coaches, like, of course you want to like fill a program, like that's part of it, but really it's like who's there feels like it matters, because I very much teach to the need of the time. Like I can't help but let the curriculum be shaped by the people who are there. So I'm really wanting to call in the people who are outrageously aligned and that will help to create the movement that the world is ready for.
Finally, where can you allow in more support right now?
Where can I allow more support? I mean, the two things that are coming up are my team, like the Ziva team, and also financially. Like, I really love the idea of getting, like, specifically women and all light workers, like, just really, like, as funnels and launderers of finances. And I have this idea that, like, Ziva, the work that I've been doing, can financially support the sacred sexuality work until it's its own engine. So just allowing my team to really, like, buttress and calling in like the people who are ready to go global. And then in so doing, like letting that money flow through in a way that feels infinitely receptive.
Emily, this conversation has been delicious. Thank you so much for bringing your heart, bringing your energy, bringing your soul. I'm feeling wildly activated. So thank you so much. Yeah.
Feeling is so mutual, Susie. Like your accuracy of listening, the detail, the presence that you bring, and then in that presence, the ability to hear and extract the details and weave them together is so masterful. Like I see why you're so good at your job, and thank you for letting me be the lucky recipient of that.
Pleasure. Thank you. If you can do me a favor and share with my lovely listeners, where can they find out all about you and your magic?
Yeah. So the best place to find everything is zivameditation.com. That's where we have both the meditation offerings and the Sacred Secret offerings. I do have a free masterclass, which is at zivameditation.com/podcast. And that's for really people who are interested in the meditation, that want the neuroscience of why is this style different? How does the 15-day training work? And we're on Instagram at Ziva Meditation. I think since we spent so much time talking about sacred sexuality, if people want to learn about that, it's zivameditation.com/secret. So of course we'll send all of these links and post them, but at Ziva Meditation is basically your one-stop shopping.
Okay, perfection. Thank you so much. If you have loved this episode as much as I have, please share it with a friend. Tag Emily, tag myself on Instagram. We want to hear what your biggest takeaways were. And in the meantime, please remember that faith plus action equals miracles. Thank you for listening to Infinite Receiving with me, Susie Ashworth. I'd love to share with you my Infinite Receiving activation audio. Go to susieashworth.com/activate infinite receiving.